So we have absolutely demolished atheism, Judaism, Islam, Mormonism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and Gnosticism. And while understanding the arguments those people who hold those beliefs tend to make as Christians and knowing how to respond to those using scripture and church history and that sort of stuff, not everyone is going to get into apologetics, and not everyone who you would talk to when out in the world is going to ask you how does Judaism pair with Christianity or how does Islam pair with it. They would want you to also talk about why you are a Christian in terms of how it has actually affected your life. And that is what I want to tell you guys today, because I didn't just become a Christian like a month ago. I've been a Christian for about, let's say, 2 years now. And back then, I wasn't really able to articulate the arguments against Judaism or Hinduism or Islam or even into atheism, at least in the at the capacity that I did in part one. Like, I still knew that there had to be a God, that God does exist, but I just wasn't really familiar with the arguments as to why. And a lot of Christians aren't familiar with those arguments, and at least at that technical capacity, but their faith is it's still legitimate because they are regenerated. Those stories do matter to people, and it also matters to them as well because it boosts their faith with God. And my testimony has certainly boosted mine because I've been through some stuff, but we'll get to that in a bit. Just to kind of kick things off right now, I've been talking for like 3 minutes. Yeah, get on with it already, Top Chud. But to start off, a bit of background about who I actually am, where I actually come from. My family is a very secular family. They didn't really like talk about the gospel or even religion to begin with, and when they would, it was just like a very surface level overview without much discussion as to like why that's the case. Mainly because I didn't really ask that sort of stuff because I didn't really care about all that. I just cared about video games and what people thought of me growing up as a kid. So I didn't really get much like throughout my whole childhood in terms of actual theology. That lasted all the way up until I'd say the end of high school because I met some friends, right, who were Christians or at least had Christian friends. They would sometimes talk about it, but again, they still didn't really do it as much because I didn't really ask that sort of stuff. I also didn't really have a moral code at the time, so hearing the stuff that you would hear from the gospel, like I was actually quite open to it, but I didn't really like a lot of the stuff because I was still in a lot of my personal sin, and I didn't want to give that up. So, but that was more of the case whenever I started to actually talk to another one of my friends regarding the scriptures because he actually like discussed the scriptures with me. By the way, this was after high school, like right after I graduated. And he would just talk about the logic behind the scriptures being true, the apostles all dying, and then as to why they would choose to die if if the resurrection of Jesus Christ was fake. He would talk about that sort of stuff, and then he also introduced me the first cause argument that something has to exist like outside of this world. He introduced me to that, but again, until very recently, I haven't really thought about it until now. And my friend, he stayed pretty persistent over the years in discussing the faith with me. And eventually I started to go to his church. This was in 2021. I was going there for a bit. The people were good, but I eventually fell off because I wanted to get back into my sin. Looking a bit of retrospect back into that. I also wasn't really thinking about the religion like myself all that much. Like I'd only really engage with it when my friend would talk to me about it. I was still heavily in my old ways, which were pretty bad. That's a different story though. There was also a lot of other stuff that I believed was wrong about the gospel, like the view on homosexuality. I was still very geared towards it being okay because I had a lot of friends who were bisexual at the time, and I didn't really want to offend them. I left for about like 2 years. But in 2022, I also started to develop a bit of a moral code. I was thinking more about how the gospel actually did affect my life a little bit. I started to kind of become open to the messaging of it once again. I started to be more inclined to actually just learn the truth for the sake of the truth. By the way, this was also when I was starting to work out as well, so I was building up a lot of discipline. I was starting to view that instant gratification is not really the way to go if you actually want to like have a fulfilling life. It's that long term gratification stuff like you get like you guys already know that. But having that sort of mindset also contributed to me like really wanting to understand the truth and really like start to take the gospel seriously. And my friend would still talk to me about scripture during this period, but it wasn't until the very end of 2023, December, to January 2024, where I had three different people. One of them was a random guy at Walmart, and then the other two were people who I met at university because I started university in that semester of spring 2024. Right on my first day being there, I met those two people, and and including the Walmart guy, they all invited me to Bible studies. This led to me really considering that God is actually trying to bring me to Him by making it super obvious by inviting me to like having three people invite me to three different studies. The first guy, I didn't go to a study because I don't know, it was a bit of a suspicious situation, but the other two people I went to the studies for. I was going to the third guy's studies a lot, and during this period, talking to him, I started to make the connection that society is as bad as it is, our morals are as bad as they are, because there is a lack of religion. Homosexuality is as rampant as it is, abortions are as rampant as they are, overall cynicism is as rampant as it is, because there is a lack of religion. And so I wanted to see how Christianity addressed a lot of those issues. By reading the actual gospel, I knew what Jesus and the apostles would say about sin and about those things, that they are sinful, that we should deny those things and follow the truth that Jesus Christ has given to us all, that God has given to us all. And so I became baptized shortly a month after and gave my life to Christ. Now, you might be asking what denomination was this church? It was a non denominational church. I know, not the best place to get introduced to the faith because I do think that non denom churches are schismatic, but they were good people. They served God. They had decent theology. By the way, I do want to clarify what denomination that I actually am now. You might have been able to guess based on my sources list in part two, but I am starting to align towards the Presbyterian denomination. The church that I'm currently going to is the Presbyterian church. I'm currently undergoing membership for that church as well. I think that Presbyterianism has probably the best confession of faith, the Westminster Confession. And from what I've seen, I mean, my opinion on Presbyterianism compared to other denominations is going to be refined because I am researching it as I'm trying to join a church that is Presbyterian, so I am doing research on the actual beliefs, but the membership courses they also cover that. But I think that the Presbyterian denomination has like they tend to like take the kind of like theology, a lot of the concepts discussed in that to their absolute extent, and I think it is a pretty important thing to learn to at least like have doctrine of, or people that have that like do speak on those things because it's important stuff. Knowing how to interpret scripture and how to actually do it, how to interpret all of like the technical stuff like predestination and even angels, whatever like stuff that we don't really have insights on. That's really important stuff, and I think the Presbyterians they tend to do like the best jobs at that, doing the research on that stuff, I think. Continuing on with my story though, yeah, being a Christian first thing was pretty difficult, but my mind actually did change a lot during that period. Like, I still wasn't really good at mitigating sin, but I took sin a lot more seriously because I knew that not following sin was the truth. I had good support from my peers as well. There was a lot of meetings and stuff which kind of really messed up with my time. And eventually there started to become some issues regarding how they wanted me to get into evangelism and overall like time commitment that the church was expecting me to do, to where eventually I kind of got overwhelmed and then just left that church. This was also the same period where I started to have a very, very big crisis in my life. This is in a fall 2024 semester, by the way, where I almost failed all of my classes. I left Air Force ROTC because I really wasn't okay with with Israel doing what they were doing to Palestine and our allegiance to Israel. Me joining the Air Force ROTC to begin with, that was whenever I wasn't a Christian. It was for entirely different reasons, but I left because of what I knew about Israel, and I couldn't consciously stay, at least in a position like that, like what I was in at the time. I still kind of question if I should have left to begin with because I do think that having people who do speak the truth in our power positions is very important, which that includes the military, politics, that sort of stuff. But I can't go back into Air Force ROTC anymore because I've graduated. So that chapter's kind of closed in my book. But I was having a lot of issues from summer until fall 2024. Oh, I forgot to mention summer. Yeah, something really, really, really bad happened in the summer. I mentioned it at the end of the next video that I'm going to post, which is going to be a more personal one. But yeah, that really affected me a lot. It's a funny story though, but I do want to talk about how it kind of affected me in that video whenever I do post it. So be on the lookout for that. It's going to be a banger. But yeah, that semester I did pass my courses and I still stayed pretty faithful to God. I was still struggling a lot, but I still saw the truth that God has given to us. And I saw it for what it was. And I really held the belief that there was really no other logical way of life than to be a Christian. That belief that I held carried me heavily throughout the period where I wasn't going to a set church because I was having a lot of trouble trying to pick a denomination and a church. This was going into spring 2025. And then this was going into spring 20, or sorry, fall 2025, all the way until this semester, where I where I'm joining that Presbyterian church. Even during the tough moments of me being a Christian, my life has ultimately improved because now I'm following truth that God intended. My respect for people has improved. My ability to critically think has improved. My ability to reason has improved. My discipline has improved. And even my speech has improved as well. My ability to talk to people has improved since I became a Christian. My, but my life has significantly changed compared to when I was atheist or agnostic, and then compared to now. And it's certainly a lot more fulfilling because of it. I will admit, I haven't really gone under much persecution yet, but that's really because for a long time I had a lot of trouble trying to bring up the gospel to people because I was still holding the view that I had from my previous church where I had to talk to people and then just bring up the gospel there, which felt very unnatural to me. But when those conversations did come up, which was one time, and it was with my stepmom, she didn't really like what I had to say. I held my ground in what I was saying, which I was saying that sin is a serious thing, and that because of sin we do deserve to go to hell for it. And then she also asked if Christianity really being the true religion is actually a nice thing, and I said, yeah, it is the true religion. And then she kind of called me a an a-hole for it, saying that it's a dangerous belief and stuff. And now I didn't really understand Islam or the other religions as I do now, but she didn't really change my mind on anything because I had the truth to back me up. But that was really only one time where I actually got flack for my faith. Kind of the way I go about bringing up the faith now is I just try to lead by example, and if the person, then I would mention like God or Christianity or something, or me going to church if the conversation warrants it. If they ask, then I'll talk about it with them and be honest with it because, well, you should be honest with it anyway. But if they don't bring it up, then I still kind of struggle trying to understand how I approach with that. But I just don't bring it up because I just assume that they don't really care. There's probably a better way that I'll figure out later on as I grow. But that's kind of how I've been approaching that. A big reason as to why I started this channel was to actually give me the incentive to research the sorts of questions that you would hear from people when they're asking about the faith, or arguments against other beliefs, or more technical questions like within the church, was to really give myself the incentive to do those things because I had a lot of commitment issues for a long time researching all of this stuff, and I feel like doing YouTube gives me an excuse to actually work for this stuff. And it also gives me the opportunity to actually talk to other people. Like for instance, there was a individual on the atheism video who commented and asking me some questions or refuting some of my stuff, and I want to see more stuff like that. Like I want my beliefs to be tested because as Christians, if our beliefs aren't tested, then we're in a pretty weak spot regarding our faith because someone could bring up a point that you've never heard, and then if it sounds plausible, if it sounds like it makes sense, then you might adopt that point whenever it's completely wrong. It's happened to me a few times, but getting into the actual weeds and talking to people about this stuff, understanding the concepts that you are trying to learn is the best way to go about this. And YouTube is probably the easiest way to do it. because it's not really on the spot. Like you have your notes, so you can like really refine your points. And then if they need to be refined again, if someone comments about something, then you can look into it there. And that actually helps out a lot with doing this sort of stuff in actual debates or in real life. It's a really important thing. All Christians should do at least something similar to this. Now, before I go, that's all I really have to talk about, but I do want to give you guys a channel update. So, the next big project regarding theology that I want to make is either going to be a top 10 list of questions that you should be able to answer when getting into general evangelism, and then I try to answer those questions, or they're going to be videos regarding why I'm not Catholic or why I'm not Eastern Orthodox, because I hold to the opinion now that I believe that the papacy is very problematic to just the church in general because humans are fallible, the popes are fallible, and then the Eastern Orthodox have a similar thing. But I want to get more familiar with the arguments that they make for what they believe and then really try to articulate those in a video and what I have to say against those. I'm probably going to do the former, so the top 10 video first, because I think it'll be more applicable to a lot more people and to also myself right now. But after that, it's going to be a video on why I'm not Catholic and then a video on why I'm not Eastern Orthodox. Acquiring material for those videos shouldn't be as long as when I tried to acquire material for part 2 of why I'm a Christian, but they will take at least a little bit because I do want to actually take my time with those. Like, for instance, I do think part 1 was a little bit rushed because I was just really anxious to get a video out and to start this channel. Like there was some sections where I could have been a bit more clear, and then I could have also edited the video a bit better and made the thumbnail a bit better. But I think I'm going to actually make a video eventually on how Christianity does refute atheism. I just don't know when that's going to be. I don't even know when that's going to be like within like my little priority list. But in between like the big projects, I want to post at least like one thing, hopefully every week, but depending on just like the ideas I have, it'll be like 2 weeks. That's my goal, being a super small channel and with my my watch time and views kind of getting messed up because I posted the channel intro video right after the atheism video, which I intended them to be switched. I wanted the atheism video to get all of the traction. Now, I mean, for the people who did come from the introduction video and liked it and commented and subscribed, I really do thank you a lot for that and actually like taking the time to watch a risky but smaller channel named Top Chud of all things. But I do appreciate that a lot. It does mean a lot to me that at least some people are taking me seriously, and hopefully more people can see my stuff and interact with it and learn from it, and I can learn from them and stuff. That's why I'm trying to upload pretty consistently. Ultimately, there's going to be nothing that's going to convince me to not be a Christian. Even back when I wasn't as theologically advanced, like nothing can convince me because I see no other way of life. And each year, as I grow in the faith, the more profound and the stronger my belief in that becomes. So, yeah, that's really about it. I do thank you for watching. If you have any suggestions for any other stuff you want to see, let me know. If you liked it, if you support what I'm trying to do, leave a like. And if you think I could do something better, then comment on that. Well, I do want to hear this stuff. But I thank you all, and God bless.